So it's 1850 and you're a hard-working pig farmer, but you've got a 400-pound sow that's got to come out of the pen. Or it's 1995 and you're a police officer on a domestic call at your local trailer park and you're staring down the barrel of a 500-pound chain-smoking, nightie-wearing ball of fury. What do both of these people need? A blacksmith-made hog catcher. That's what we're going to make today.
Okay.
Good morning, folks. My name is Trenton Ty, and I'm here at Purgatory Iron Works, and today we are in fact going to be making a very unique tool called a hog catcher. Again, this comes from the Sorber Collection, a collection of Colonial Wrought Iron. There's a beautiful book, and the hog catcher is a piece that is meant to go on the end of a pole, and it's basically a modified pair of tongs. It's got two kind of pointy, teethy looking ends to it, and basically what happens is it has been modified so that there is a string on one end of the tong. So basically what happens is you put this thing on a stick, you run it up to the leg of the hog, pull the string, the tongs close, and now you can actually drag the hog out of the pen by one leg. It's a very, very interesting piece. The stock that we're going to be using today is 1 inch by 3/8. And again, we're essentially making a pair of tongs that will be mounted to a stick. Now that means that we've got to actually make a socket, and there's a couple of punched holes we have to do as well. It's a very interesting project. I think you guys will like it. Let's get started. So guys, very much like with a standard pair of tongs, what I have done is I have laid off about 2 inches of material right here to work down into the first jaw of our tongs. Now the jaw itself is just rounded, and again I'm guesstimating on how much material I'm going to need. So we're just going to kind of heat and beat until we get somewhere close to what we need. Now guys, when I was making this, I could have absolutely come in here and used a fullering tool to make a drop right there, but I didn't have it on hand and I'm feeling a little lazy today. Now folks, one thing I want to show you is that even if you didn't use a fuller or any type of set tool to make that nice corner, if you have that rounded shoulder on the anvil, you can actually use that to make a nice indentation on the piece. I'll show you how to do that right now. So you guys can see that that's not necessarily a great clean division, so I can turn this around right here and set that down, and that looks pretty darn good. I'm shooting for about a 3/8 by 3/8 square, and I'm super close to that. One more heat, maybe drawing out a little bit more over the horn, and then we'll round the edges. That's looking pretty good right there, so now I'm going to come in, I'm going to knock the sharp corners off of this, because remember this will be used to grab a leg, so you don't want anything sharp on there. Don't want to tear up anything on the hog unnecessarily. It's looking pretty good there, and let's give it a little bit of curvature. Now again, I stress this is the first time I've ever made one of these, so many of the measurements, many of the things I'm doing, I am guesstimating, so don't be surprised if we have to make some adjustments. So I'll start right here by kind of bending this down over the corner of the anvil, and then I'll come over here to the horn. I'm just going to give myself something like that. Now, the next thing we need to do is actually go ahead and punch that hole, but before I do, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set in this corner so I can isolate our little turning piece there, our platform. And this time, instead of just forging this out, I'm going to show you guys how I actually come over to the corner of the anvil and set this thing down. It's a pretty cool technique. All right, we know that's going to be our opposite side. I kind of want about an inch, maybe a little bit more, but what I'm going to do here is strike it over this corner. And you can see how it's delineated. Again, I'm going to work this pretty hot, so I'm going to take that and take another heat and continue the work. Now essentially what we are building is just a pair of tongs, and if you guys haven't practiced making your tongs, you really need to. Tooling is king, 100%. Even 25 years into this craft, either it's when you're doing handwork or you're using power hammers, tooling is really going to tell you how effective you're going to be doing good work. Most of the time when you guys see really good work, that you've got crisp corners, you've got things that are put into place correct, it's not done freehand, it's done by the proper tooling. So there's a good argument to be made, as an effective blacksmith, you're more about the tooling than you are the hammering. We've got the initial part of the range. She's looking good. And now we're going to bring our hand punch out here. Go ahead and punch and drift this hole. All right, we've got our hole down. If you don't have a hole down for your anvil, if you're working by yourself, make you one. It is a very important tool. All right, we're going to start right here with the initial tippy taps. I have a can of water hidden down here behind the anvil you guys can't see because it's magic. Oh, this poor punch. Let me straighten this bad boy back out. Now, the bad thing is what I was punching with, turns out wasn't even my punch. I mistakenly grabbed my soft, mild steel drift. So I got to fix my drift now. This is the actual proper punch. And now we're going to flip this bad boy over, and we're going to go to the pritchel hole to take out our plug there. So we're going to set her right over here. And again, we're eyeballing. Now I'm going to tell you, when I first started doing the blacksmith work, this just drove me nuts because I was used to precision. I was like, how in God's name can they line that up and it go through correctly? It is of no end of satisfaction that I'm able to do this freehand now and get good punches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up just a little bit more with my punch so that I can get my drift in there. And we're going to open this up to about a 1/2 inch. Why are we opening up to a 1/2 inch? Because it's currently the only drift that I have on hand. All right, so again, I'm just using this to open up the hole just a little bit. And because that punch is so particularly tapered, you really need to go in from both sides. Now, I do want to point out that at this point, we're good to go. We're going to leave it right there. That's going to be a good 3/8. And I'm going to hold what I'm doing right there. That's very reasonable. Now again, I usually prefer to drift so that I get an exact measurement, but we can work with this. Them hogs ain't going to care. All right, we've got 2 issues now that we need to solve. Now on this particular piece, there's going to be one other punched hole right here in the middle. And what that's for is that's a pass-through for the string that will go to the other side of the tongs. It sounds complicated, you'll understand when I show you. But this is also the side that's going to attach to the pole, which means we've got to make the socket on this side. Now, this is 3/8 material by 1 inch. To spread this into a socket is going to require a lot of work. So, before I figure out where I'm going to actually put the hole on this side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spread that socket first, and then we'll figure out where everything else goes, because the socket is going to be the most important part of all this to fit on the end of the pole. So let's take a heavy heat here and let's start spreading it. So guys, one of the things I want to point out is this is going to be heavy moving work in the steel. This is where having a striker or friend in the shop, or having a power hammer, better yet, comes into play rather, because this is in fact work. Boy, it's going to be a lot of work to move that much material, to spread it, to be thin enough to be that socket. So when you're doing this work, grab a friend, grab a sledge. You're going to save your arm and your shoulders a lot of pain if you use the appropriate tool for the appropriate job. Having said that, I'm going to hammer a little bit on the anvil so it looks good, and then quietly slip off to the power hammer. That's right. Look at all this hand-forged goodness. We're just going to get a little started here and, just take a little break off camera, and then it's going to be really nice because, of course, we do everything by hand forging here, right? Oh, look how much I got done in 1 heat. Whew, sure is hot in here. I wonder how I could do this faster. Whew, that was certainly a lot of hard hand hammering work. But you guys can see that even using a power hammer, that was 4 really good heats. To do this by hand will be triple that. So just understand that when you're moving that heavier metal, get a friend, don't blow your arm out. The fact is, if I had done that by hand, that's a lot even for a practice smith. So be smart about how you work. But you can see that we have gotten this down on the edge to somewhere around maybe a 14 gauge, which is good. And I'm gonna tell you, one of the things that always amazed me is just how janky these things look before the sockets rolled. I always wanted to come in and super clean it up, and that's just not how they were done. In fact, a lot of these sockets on these lighter tools were not forge welded together, they were just rolled. So it's great practice if you want to try to forge weld this one. This is going to be one of those cases where I'm not going to forge weld it, but I am just going to roll it. What I'll do is I'll take a heat, and the first place we're going to start is up here around the top to actually kind of get our crease in there. If you've got a swage block, it's super handy for that. We're going to try to use the difference between our table and the face of the anvil, and then we're going to go ahead and roll this guy over. So guys, we're going to start by using this little square corner here on our anvil. And the thing is again, this is really where a swage block comes in handy because you've got these shapes. But I'm going to try to make do on this piece just to show you guys how it can be done here. Make sure and take yourself a good heat. We're going to lay it right up in there, and that's how we start that fold. And then you can come in and follow that line straight on down, making that center crease. And once you've got that center crease, work it from both sides. Again, using that corner. And you can see us rolling it up relatively nicely. So now I'm going to make sure and take another heat, and because this is where most of your hard action is going to take place. So one more heat. All right, there's our lap. We're going to tuck one side under the other. Okay, now this is where you can come in with your horn of the anvil. Now the problem with this is this horn is so thick and girthy. It's going to be a little too much for this particular socket. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to go over to my mandrel where I have a piece that actually was specifically designed for doing these sockets that Jay Riekert had made. So let's go over there. Now I'm going to move to a lighter hammer. And that's usually better for doing these type of sockets because you're dealing with a thinner metal. But you guys can see that again, we now have a very workable socket. Very workable. I'm probably going to take one more heat and clean it up just a tad bit more. But then we should be pretty good to go. All right, here we go again. And folks, I think that's going to be where we're at. That's a very reasonable socket. We should be able to get our chunk of wood in there, and that should hold very well. Now, if you were doing a super job of this, you'd continue this fold and you'd actually weld this over on the overlap, but we don't need to do all that. Not for this particular item. So now, we just got to come in here and do a little work right here. Folks, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch out a little bit more material, give myself a little bit of extra length on that shank. And if you've noticed, I've left a small area that has been pretty much untouched, and that's where I'm going to actually put my hole. But I want to make sure that I have the correct length coming down from the actual hook itself so that I can get good leverage with my string. Sounds weird, you'll understand when we put it together. All right guys, so I'm going to come in right here, and we're just going to give ourselves a little bit of extra length on what is essentially the reins of our tongs. All right, I think we're looking pretty good there. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and punch the hole, and then we're actually gonna need to rotate this 90 degrees to put our flat punched hole perpendicular to the axis of how we're grabbing our hog leg. Does that sound right? I think that's right. Yeah, I'm on it. We're good to go. Let's punch a hole. We're gonna use our turbo encabulator to parallelogramize the rhombozoid of the quadratic square of the turbo encabulator. How we do it. All right, that should put us most of the way through. Roll it over and flatten it out. This may be a little more hinky than I originally anticipated, simply because I got to balance this over the hole. We got other concerns here. Easy, big boy. Easy. Man, it makes me feel good when I can do that. Let's take one more heat and let's open it on the way up. So guys, I'm going to use the punch just to open this up, and I am going to drift this with my 1/2 inch, but I think I've got to get it up to about 3/8 before the 1/2 inch drift will go in there. And let me grab the drift and see if it'll start to fit. It will, but we are not going to drift at that heat because it's going to take it away from me and spit it right back at me, because that's some heavy metal. Take another heat and then we'll drift it. Now, one of the things about tooling, and this is where you're going to find a lot of people that kind of have to talk out of both sides of their mouth. You can do most all jobs with a set of basic tools. However, you can't do most jobs well with a set of basic tools. You know, if you're on the roadside and you've got to take a lug nut off and you have a pair of needle nose pliers, you might be able to get those lug nuts off. However, you are not going to be a happy person after you're done. In a very similar fashion, when we do this particular work, almost everything that I do could in fact use a dedicated tool. But one of the things you're going to have to figure out as you progress in your blacksmithing is exactly what level are you going to do it to. You know, if you're making S-hook, do you have a tool for every stage of the S-hook? If you make tongs, and now that's a great thing because there's tons of videos that have tooling literally for every step in the tong making process. There's a great power hammer tool that's out there that shows that. So just understand, a lot of ways to skin that cat, but not all of them are created equal. So here's our 1/2 inch drift, and guys, this is why we use drifts instead of just tapered pieces. Hiya! That is why we use a drift, because you can just beat the snot out of it and now can be absolutely assured that that is a clean and perfect 1/2 inch hole. So again, we could have done that with the punch, but it would not have been as neat, and it certainly would not have been as timely. Now, you guys saw me flatten that back out, and you did see the hole go wonka jaw. That's no problem. That's to be expected. What you do is make sure and flatten everything, and then from the backside, come back in with the drift one more time, and you are absolutely good to go. Now, the only other thing that we need to do is I'm going to take one more heat. I'm going to pop this in the vise and turn this 90 degrees. All right, we're just going to pop this right into here. We're going to grab our twisting wrench, and we're just going to give her a twist. 90 degrees. So that now our hole is in line with our hook. Yep. Come on, let go there, biggin. So what will happen now is that when we add the other side of our tongs, the string will pass through this hole to that other tong side, that other handle, and then when you pull the string down the pole, it will close the tongs around the hog's leg. Okay guys, so let's look at what we've got. I hope you enjoyed that cool montage. I want to get myself some 80s music because, you know, the 80s did the montages the best. So I want to get some rockin' like Kung Fury 80s retro montage music. Anyway, you can see how this bad boy works. Just like a pair of tongs, except you've got this hole through the middle here and also one here. So a string is tied through this and passed through this hole. So basically it's held like this. You reach in, grab the hog, pull the string, and you can grab the leg. So we're just going to pop a rivet into this. We're going to get it mounted up onto the stick, and we're going to see how she functions. Now, as a bit of a bonus today, I don't have any of my pre-made rivets ready to go. So what I am going to do is I'm actually going to make one from scratch by hand. So you guys are going to get to see that. And I'm making this out of some 1/2-inch square bar. So let's get going. So guys, this is a novel way of setting yourself on fire. This is a novel way of making a rivet head. So I'm just doing this for fun. Just kind of give you guys a little bit of extra ideas of what you can do in a pinch. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm using the swage to actually swage it down and separate what's going to be the head from the rest of the shank. So I'll take one more heat, I'll start working it over here, and then using this corner to spread the head. Now remember, if you've seen previous videos, what we do is we come in and we give ourselves a relief behind that head so that when we do this, it doesn't interfere. Now, there's actually a proper way to do this type. I am not very good at it. But that should get us close enough to where we need to be. Now, I'll come in here. I'm actually going to hammer this down to our thickness before I cut it loose from the bar. All right, that should give you enough playroom. So I'm going to grab the cutting hardy, snip it, and then we'll make sure and work it on down into fitting it to our holes. Okay, there we go. And now I'll clean this up and make sure she fits. Just to let everybody know what just happened, camera lady got a little too close to the large shop fan, and we had somewhat of an intake of the hair. So we got a free haircut in the shop today. Now, guys, I'm not gonna lie, hanging on to a piece like this is a pain in the hind end. Even with good tongs, it is always a pain in the butt. Don't you do it to me, you monkey joker. I'm on camera. It's supposed to be easy. Super easy and fun and informative. And everybody's gonna go out in their garage and do this with ease. This doesn't look easy. All right, guys, here's our rivet. I got it forged out, and then I took it to the hand file grinder, and now she is ready to go into our pieces. So what we're going to do is we're going to, first of all, measure just how much we need. I will actually mark this bad boy off. I'll give myself, now remember, as a general rule of thumb, when you're doing riveting, you leave, however wide your rivet is, you leave that amount of material exposed. So if it's a 1/2-inch rivet, you leave 1/2 inch exposed to rivet down. Now when I'm doing tongs, I almost always do a little bit more than that. I always like to have a little bit more meat. But just again, as the rule of thumb, when you're doing a rivet, the height that you leave is equal to the thickness of the rivet itself. So I'll come in about 3/8 of an inch, maybe a 1/2 inch, a little bit more, cut this, and then we'll be able to rivet this bad boy together. So guys, I've got the rivet in the fire without tongs on it, which means I'm going to be looking for it for the next 3 days. But hopefully, when I find it, we're going to go to the top of the anvil, we'll drop it in hot and begin the riveting process. Now, I will actually finish it with everything hot. I'll take the rivet and the tongs into the fire and then finish it up that way so that we can stretch everything out and make sure that that jaw is loose. All right, one hot rivet going in. All right, we're going to flip it over. We're going to go to town. Now remember, nothing about this was machined. So if it actually works, I'm going to be pretty impressed. Look at there. Okay. Looks like I need to adjust the jaw just a little bit. Now the fact that it moves so freely and it's not going anywhere, you know, this isn't a precision item. We just need to get that around the hog's leg to do the deal. So I am thinking it may be a situation where we leave good enough alone, maybe just a tad bit more, because you want it to be able to flex and move very easily. And it's not coming off. But let's adjust those, let's adjust the jaws a little bit though. Okay guys, so here we go. And I am going to just kind of, just want to make sure that we have a good closure on there. And boy, this joker is not wanting to cooperate in any shape, form, or fashion. Maybe if I were to use a pair of tongs, like an intelligent blacksmith would, maybe we'd have a little bit more luck. There we go. That's not terrible bad. Looking good. All right, let's get this mounted on our stick, and we need a little bit of string. Let's look at how she functions. All right, so guys, here it is. Now this stick was actually shaved out just the other day by one of our new guys, Leland Chandler, and so he made this specifically for our hog catcher video. Now I'm assuming that back in the day their sticks would have been a little bit straighter. We're just kind of stick poor here in Georgia. But let me show you how this works. You can see that she's been mounted here. I've just got one little nail in there to hold it. You can see how that works. So what's going to happen is I got a piece of string here, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to put myself a square knot, not a granny knot, a square knot, boys and girls. Don't tie a granny knot, bad for your complexion. There's a square knot, and then that string will actually go through the hole in your handle. Now again, if you didn't realize how this worked, now I'm sure that you do. What happens is you have that kind of locked open right there. You can like wedge a piece of wood or something in there to hold it. You reach into the pin, grab the leg, and then when you do, pull the string, which closes the tongs, and now you've got a firm hold on the leg, and you can pull the hog out of either the hog pen or the trailer. So that's how that works. Folks, these are super interesting projects, and it never ceases to amaze me the different number of techniques that I have to use to get something like this put together. This is not a beautiful piece. It is functional, and I promise you this, if you were to put this beside the pieces in the Sorber collection, it would look very much the same way. They were not concerned with it looking good. They just needed it to function and to work. And to that end, I'm not sure if we needed like an inlaid hog catcher back on the farm, but maybe they're out there. Guys, this is super awesome stuff, and I want to thank you so much for being here for this season of videos. As always, if you have questions or comments about this piece, leave them down below. We answer each and every one of them. But if you did enjoy this video, here it comes. You know it's coming. You know it's coming. You know what to do. But in all seriousness, these videos that we've been filming here on the latter part of the year are brought to you by the generous support of our Patreons. We cannot thank them enough. Without them, this would not be happening. If you enjoyed these videos and want to help support the work, please go over to Patreon. There's a free sign up for Patreon, and we actually have extra content even for our free Patreons. And then maybe if you like it enough, you might help us support the channel. But outside of all that begging crapola, thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time right here at Purgatory Ironworks.